And we are back. Ready for the roundtable from part 2 of Group C. Animated J, can you remind everybody what the roundtable topic is?
The value of the first 15 seconds of your show. So, first impressions.
Fantastic. So I'm sure everybody's got a lot to say on this, so I'm just gonna floor Blitzen, Flo, who wants to start?
I guess I don't mind starting. So there's definitely some level some level of skill and understanding you can tell with even just the very first movement, practically the first half second, but kind of a limited amount. Like the first thing I notice is just how smooth is their movement, and is it going along like an actual, like, say a straight line, or like if it's going in a circle like they're doing this sort of thing, is it a perfect circle? Are they maintaining a constant speed through the circle, uh, or or is it kind of like this circle-ish sort of shape? So that's the sort of the first thing I see, and then if they get some time, move with their hands apart, within 15 seconds they will. You'll be able to see what we talked about with Youngblood show, where he had very clear, like there's this illusion of like stuff happening in the space between the hands. So you'll get enough time to see that as well. And I think those are two very important things.
Okay. The technical introductions, sounds
Uh,
like
it
it's
doesn't
like,
even need to be technical.
yeah, just being clean with it.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, like, if there just is an introduction in general, like there's been so many times where I've just been like still sitting down and then the person's already like in the middle, like just goes right into, like liquid or something, without any like speed progression. And there's just no beginning. And generally I think I see that from Glovers that feel like rushed almost during their shows, and don't want to take their time a little bit more. And I think it's okay, especially in the beginning, to take your time, because you can, you're either building anticipation for something, or you're, if that's what's happening in the music, again, you have to acknowledge that there's music playing, to tell some type of story, at least.
What's funny is I completely agree with what you're saying, Blitzen, 100%. However, when you said that, the first person that came to mind is actually someone who every time I've traded with, they always just start right away, and when we're at a festival, it's perfectly fine because it goes right with the music. PM Shorty. Whenever I trade with him, he just always goes right into it, and it works. I don't know how he does it, but it just works. But if you're not PM Shorty, that doesn't work. So don't try that. Definitely have an introduction.
Yeah, I like to tell people that you have to know the rules really well and be able to work with them before you break them.
Totally.
I'm sorry. Otherwise you're smashing. Otherwise you're just a bull in a china shop and you're just smashing everything, and that's not.
Yep.
Totally. Again, I mean, back to the, because we're talking about first impressions. Like, what is the first thing that people see? Like, that it's so important, especially I see in gloving, because a lot, it's like you guys, you take your time in the beginning, because that's like when the song's building up. It's a lot of like this bringing it, and then you have, you go at it. So I know, because we've been watching the, like, for this season or this episode, those two Glovers in particular, and I felt that they didn't have, I guess, the, how could I say, like the cleanliness yet,
They didn't command your attention.
right, they didn't command my attention, and it's so important, like the first, again, like we're talking about that first impression, like how are you going to keep people interested, how are you going to pull them in, and especially, and this could be a topic in itself, gloving to a non-glover, giving a show to a non-glover versus giving a show to another glover, because now you guys are
I definitely want to cover that as a full topic in a later episode for sure.
because you guys are breaking it down. You guys could see, oh, like, yeah, that wasn't clean. That wasn't this, in that first few seconds. So it is interesting. The first impression is definitely interesting.
I know you said, go ahead, Mary.
I was gonna say also, like, how, especially in a competition setting, like for me like immediately, like how does the person frame themselves, like in the camera? Because I noticed this from not in this, just I think out of all the shows I've watched so far, there's been like a couple people where they were just framing like their face down, which is fine. But if showmanship is like part of the the criteria, then you're cutting out a certain amount of space, and you're having just also less space to work with, and I think generally glovers that maybe just don't have as much experience are almost like maybe camera shy in a way, and I think that's something that you have to kind of learn to embrace at a certain point, and that comes with experience and filming to a camera, over and over and over again and getting more comfortable with it.
So these sounds like elements, even just outside of just practicing the drills, just be like you said, being comfortable with a camera, being comfortable with how you're framing yourself. So it's almost like it just starts to, again, just as you as a person, how comfortable, how confident, how committed you are to what you're about to share with others. So,
Yeah, I know I had something I kind of wanted to bounce off of Mary, because you said something about how like some shows sort of not really having an intro and just sort of going right into it, and James said mentioned something about how some shows will, like, it's like you have to get like hooked in first. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this process of the way I sort of see it is almost like fishing someone. Like you have to sort of like hook them at the beginning and start like reeling them into this like sort of atmosphere that you're building, this like state of mind of being in a light show before you sort of unleash on them. And I see it as sort of like the difference between like someone gloving in front of my face and actually getting a light show. I wanted to know, like, Mary, if you had anything to say about sort of that process of like reeling someone in.
I think it's more so because I think it's okay to have like a big beginning. Like it doesn't always have to start from here and then expanding outwards. But I think that it's a like complete thought beginning to end. Like, for example, if we're just using a very simple movement to just kind of, break it down. Like if you're doing a finger roll, right? And that's the first move, you probably wouldn't want to start in the middle of the finger roll. You know what I mean? Because it's not a complete thought. So you can still hook someone and not have it start slow and then progress. It can be something like big in the beginning. But for me, at least, it has to have a complete thought, because we're trying to in the context of judging, storytelling, a beginning, middle, and an end.
Yeah,
I actually want to chime in on that. Talking about a complete thought, the immediate example that came to my head, and I've definitely been guilty of this in the past too, is you'll see a gloving video and it will start with a specific verse, and the glover will immediately be acting out the verse of it, and at some point they shift from miming out the verse to gloving to the actual song. And there's a moment that transition from the verse to the beat is a very clear indicator of if they had a complete thought or if they didn't. Because if they didn't, it'll just be like this kind of like jerk into like a reset motion. Whereas if they were to actually complete the thought, there's a smooth transition, or it happens at a time where the verse changes or ends. That I think it's a very spot on explanation. So yeah, if they are stopping or resetting or anything like that, it's a very clear indicator of, oh, this person did not have a complete thought from intro to body of their light show. So something to definitely be wary of for anyone either competing or just making a video that starts with a verse, specific lyric that you follow. Make sure you that.
So, is it possible that, which of course anything is possible, but how likely is it that you see a good intro, but then the rest falls apart?
Not likely, but not
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah, it certainly happens because I mean, even a great Glover, we give our bad light shows, and it can also and it can also depend on the song because sometimes, especially if you're at a show where you're transitioning from song to song and you just start whenever, like you can start on a song where it's like I love this song, and then it transitions like after your intro into a song where you're just like.
Not feeling it.
I'll finish.
Mm.
But you're not gonna have like a 10 out of 10 intro and like a 3 out of 10. It's rest of it. That's just not gonna happen.
The other way around is surprisingly common though, where like the intro
Yes.
and the build-up is kind of meh, and all of a sudden the drop hits, and you're like, I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I apologize, I take back everything I was about to say.
Yep.
I think
Absolutely.
you can have a creative intro. I think maybe it's maybe it's not necessarily a good intro, but it's creative. Or you can see that the person was trying to at least think outside the box and do something different. And then maybe they just didn't see, or some, they don't connect that theme that they used in the intro to the rest of the show. Or it was like something you saw in the beginning and you're like, that was cool. And then you just don't ever see it again the rest of the light show.
Okay.
Actually, we did have an example earlier in the competition in Group B where we had a Glover who had a great intro, like the first 30 seconds were like amazing, and it just kind of like trailed off and was just like, oh, it didn't really continue past that. So it's more of using all your best stuff in the beginning. I guess that's the closest comparison to a Glover starting well and kind of fizzing out.
Okay. So
Yeah.
don't do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've seen some dance videos that are non-gloving that also do that too. So it's definitely not restricted to gloving. It's definitely a movement art.
Yeah. And I think starting like you have to like get into a flow of sorts, and I think that process of getting into it is can be very difficult sometimes. So
I think
I
Jake
think
with the back and forth there, but first impressions, right? First impressions are super important. I think first impressions are also a little bit of a danger because when someone makes a first impression on you, you also have to, as a judge, as just a viewer of their light show, or in general, I think there's a fine line between first impression and first judgment, and we always have to make sure that we are tiptoeing on the correct side of that line, both as judges and just as light show enthusiasts in general. But anyway, we'll be back in a couple days with the last episode of Group C, closing out round 1. Thank you to Animated J, Blitzen, Van Flo. See you guys in a couple days.
Peace.
Just